What's good, family? I'm Nikesha Elise Williams, the host of Black and Published podcast, and the author of the novel, The 7 Daughters of Dupree. This historical fiction novel is about the secrets kept between mothers and daughters over the course of 7 generations, and is told backwards in time from 1995 to 1860. The 7 Daughters of Dupree was published January 27, 2026, and is available everywhere books are sold. So if you can, please consider getting a copy of The 7 Daughters of Dupree today.
This is the Mahogany Books Podcast Network.
She, at some point, was gently like, hey, so, do you think maybe you want to kind of come up with a title that relates more to the themes of the book? And I was like, no, I don't. Actually, it's called Sugar. It's been sugar for 20 years, lady.
What's good? I'm Nikesha Elise Williams, and this is Black and Published on the Mahogany Books Podcast Network, bringing you the journeys of writers, poets, playwrights, and storytellers of all kinds. Today's guest is Amy DuBois Barnett, author of the novel, If I Ruled the World. It's a story Amy began during her tenure in corporate media, specifically working as an editor at several major magazines, including Essence, EBONY, and as the editor-in-chief of Honey.
And then when I got a 2-book contract from my wonderful publisher, Flatiron, which changed my life completely. Because a 1-book contract is like, great, it's like wonderful, my book's gonna be published. A 2-book contract is like, well, shit, I'm an author. You know what I mean? The feeling of like, oh, I'm an author now, and that just completely changed my life to have fulfilled a dream in my 50s.
Living the dream of becoming a novelist is something Amy's wanted to do since she enrolled in an MFA program in her 20s. In our conversation, she discusses her circuitous route into magazine publishing that ultimately brought her back to fiction. Plus, why she believes it's important for women to take themselves on small adventures. And what she believes is the true cost of ambition. That and more is next when Black and Published continues. All right, Amy, first question. When did you know that you were a writer?
I always knew that I loved writing. Do you know what I mean? Like, writing was always my special skill. It was my special thing. But when I knew that I was a writer, that probably happened a little later, like more in my 20s, when I went to grad school. I got an MFA in creative writing in my 20s, and that's absolutely not necessary for being a writer, but for me, it was very clarifying, and it helped me find my community, and it helped me find my voice, and it helped center me in this métier. It helped me center myself in this kind of passion, in this art, in this talent, and helped me understand, that I really did have a place in that world.
Come on, vocabulary, métier, yes. Teach me something on today. I think I've heard you talk about this, about getting your MFA in your 20s. Is that when you started what became If I Ruled the World?
No,
okay.
No. So I have a very, I have a very, very sad novel that I wrote in my 20s. So when I went to grad school, it was just a few years after my mother passed away. And so I was kind of writing through a lot of that. And so a lot of my writing in that period was cathartic, you know what I mean, in lots of ways, but I was writing through that pain. And so the book that I wrote, and I did write a full novel when I was in grad school. That book, I look back on it periodically, and I may do something with it eventually. It's beautifully written. I must say it's lovely, but it's sad. It's incredibly heavy. And I really need to be in the right state of mind to go back to that book. But If I Ruled the World, I started it in my maybe mid 30s, and then I finished it in my 50s because I put it away for a bunch of years for a bunch of reasons, you know what I mean? But that was a much, much sort of different story in terms of theme and absolutely tone.
Mm-hmm. I know you have this like media mogul career, but what about writing a novel always intrigued you to want to go back to that page and write while you're living this fabulous New York media life?
It's fabulous.
I'm assuming it's
You
fabulous from the post.
I mean, it's funny. And I was just talking about this. When you see somebody's like fabulous kind of like life, right? And it looks so fabulous because I recognize that my professional life was very visible, you know what I mean? And it was fun. I mean, I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of access. I had a lot of, I got to do a lot of amazing things. I met incredible humans. So that part was amazing. The flip side of that is the stress and the pressure and the hours. I mean, the hours that I worked, nobody saw that. Everybody just sort of saw me out looking cute, out on the town, what I mean, whatever. But you didn't see that I was like, eating dinner from the vending machine because I was working in the office until midnight the night before. That's the thing that you don't see. And so I guess I always thought that I was going to be a novelist. When I was in grad school, that's what I thought I was going to do, like for my life. I was like, okay, I'm going to write novels. And then when I was in grad school, I got an award for a short story that I wrote. And the person who presented me with the award was the then editor in chief of Essence magazine. And because I took a sort of circuitous route into my MFA program. And I had worked in finance for a couple of years, not my spiritual journey. I'd worked in fashion, also not my spiritual journey. But I was working at a teeny little fashion magazine to pay for my life while I was in grad school. So when I graduated from the program, the EIC of Essence offered me a role as the fashion and beauty features editor over there. And that's what started me on my journey into media, for which I'm incredibly honored, and I love that I've been able to represent Black folks like all these years. I mean, it's been amazing. But, just this feeling of writing, you know what I mean, of kind of crafting sentences and crafting story and creating characters that just never left me. And even though I had this amazing career in media, I always wanted to return to this world of storytelling. And now I'm psyched to represent us in a different way now as a storyteller.
And so, what made you come back to that story that you started in your 30s while you're on this media journey and tell a story about that life that you live that's not about you? It is fiction. Let's give the disclaimer, this is not auto fiction.
It's really not.
It's not
God.
auto fiction. It is actual fiction. She made it all up.
I really did.
But what brought you back so many years later that you were like, I want to try to live this dream that I've had forever?
The story never left me. And it sounds crazy to say that over all those years, but I would periodically kind of like pick it up, because when I started writing it, I mean, I wrote about 100 pages in my 30s. And it was a different type of a story also. I don't say lighter fare, but I just didn't really have the themes of the book nailed down. It was just, I had this sort of like general plot of a story, but I didn't really understand what I was actually writing about, right? So I kept picking up and putting it down. And then all of a sudden, in 2023, as I was leaving corporate media, it just felt like a burning desire to pick it back up again. And I think that was because I had like 15 years of reflection and insight onto the story, onto the era, and onto the themes that I really want to write about. Like that's when I was like, oh, wait a minute. This isn't just a story about a girl who wants to be editor in chief, right? This is a story about the cost of ambition. You know what I mean? It's a story about finding your voice. It's a story about the era also. It's a story about, the misogyny, the rampant kind of the sexual harassment and sexual violence. It's a story about like just the danger that lurked underneath all of that kind of glamour of the era. And so when I really understood what it was I wanted to explore, then I had to finish the book. I couldn't leave it alone anymore.
How long did it take you to write? Like once you really buckled into it?
People keep asking me that. So because it's a hard one, right? Because I wrote 100 pages in my 30s and I remember it really like flowing out of me. Once I had the story, it just flowed out. Yeah, I had a full-time job, mind you. I was editor in chief of Teen People. It was the largest teen magazine in the world at that point. And I was still like writing on the weekends and it was flowing, you know what I mean? So that was maybe, I don't know, a few months back then. And then when I picked it back up, it was the top of 2023. And I rewrote everything that I'd written back in the day. I wrote a prologue, and that prologue that I have on my book, it didn't exist. So I just really changed so many aspects of the book. And then it took me about, I would say, maybe 8 months to finish like that next draft because I started going, you know what I mean? Like I was really like, the energy was just sort of pulling me. And then my beta readers were like, this is great, rewrite it. So then but that didn't take, I mean, it took me maybe another 4 months because it went to auction at the top of 2024. So it was like a year of very serious full-time work, rewriting what I already had, kind of moving it forward.
A productive year.
Right. So the book, I would say in total was probably like a year and a half, 2 years.
And so then once you do get it to auction, how has the publishing part of the journey been? Like the getting to do this thing that you've always wanted. How has that experience been for you?
Oh my God. I mean, it changed my life. It changed I mean, first of all, my book went to auction, like, you know what I mean? Like you have to understand. I mean, I know I've had this wonderful career, but this is my baby. It's my first novel that I'm putting out there in the world. Who knows if anybody's going to like it? You never know. And the fact that multiple people did like it, was already crazy. And then when I got a 2-book contract from my wonderful publisher, Flatiron, which changed my life completely. Because a 1-book contract, is like great. It's like wonderful. My book's gonna be publishing. A 2-book contract is like, well, shit, I'm an author. You know what I mean? The feeling of like, oh, I'm an author now. And I mean, that just completely changed my life. So, I mean, that news was, again, it's hard to even explain how just life-changing it was to have fulfilled a dream that I started in my 20s and fulfill it in my 50s. I mean, it's difficult to describe. And then there's the publishing process. I was really fortunate. My editor, Flatiron, is amazing. She's brilliant. I mean, she really took my book to the next level in so many ways. And I'm also good at receiving, it says I'm good at receiving it because I'm an editor by trade, right? This is my core competency, you know what I mean? And so I'm like, make me better. Let's go. Like, give me the notes. Like, make me better.
So you're looking for the long edit letter.
Yeah, I'm like, make me, I mean, but then of course there's the difficulty of like, actually you get the notes, you get the edit letter and you're like, oh snap, it's like 3 pages long. All right. And then you just have to kind of systematically go through it, and figure out like how you're going to, do it. And then you got to go back again, and then you got to shorten it, which is what I did. I, trimmed and I, by every sentence, every word. So that part was painstaking and difficult, but also like very rewarding, because I really appreciate the editing process. The cover process was less fun, if I'm honest. That was way less fun, so that was a tough one. But the editing process itself was hard, but I was excited to get better.
What did the editing process in being edited at that level in this new space teach you about editing, since that is your, as you said, core competency?
It taught me, I would say, a lot about story structure and character. I mean, I learned a lot of that in an MFA program, but taking it from, I'm a talented writer who's taken some classes with some talented writers to, okay, now I'm a professional writer and we're creating a product that's going to go on shelves and in the market. It's a different kind of level of intensity and it's a different level of focus. You know what I mean? So I think for me, kind of like really digging into the structure in a different kind of a way. A reader facing way was very different. And then really thinking through the characters and making sure that they all had motivations that made sense, I think was also important. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I also want to ask the inverse of the same question. So then what did your years of work and success as an editor teach you about writing and crafting a novel?
One of the things that when I was in media, I was very intentional around was pushing the boundaries of and the parameters of what we consider is like authentically Black. I think there's something inherently limiting for Black folks when we start to judge too much what is authentically Black. When we start to say, well, Black people don't do this and Black people don't talk like that, or you don't sound Black, or you know what I mean? Like, to me, that's just limiting us, and I don't like that. So one of the things I wanted to do, with my protagonist was push the boundaries of what is considered to be traditionally and authentically Black, right? So there's that. And then there's also the tone. I ran a lot of brands that had varied content, right? Everything from fashion and beauty to health to travel to social issues to politics to sports. So I'm a generalist as a journalist. And one of the things I learned is that you can't just throw facts and figures and information at people. If you want them to resonate, a social issue or a political story to resonate, you can't just throw the information at them. You have to wrap it in narrative. You have to wrap it in something that's compelling. You have to create an interesting context and empathy so that people really care about this thing. And so that's like a particular story. But then when you're creating an entire entity, you have to kind of add some kind of sugar with the medicine. You know what I mean? Like, what's the fun thing that you're putting in there that makes this package, this magazine, this site, this project, whatever it is, appealing, so that you can also weave in these important issues, right? And so when I was writing If I Ruled the World, I was very intentional with the tone. I wanted to write a page turner. I wanted to write something that had commercial elements to it. I very intentionally didn't sort of write a heavy literary work. I very intentionally created something that had humor, that was fast paced, because I wanted to explore these issues, these deeper themes, in a way that was going to be kind of compelling to a broader audience. I really want to write like something that was smart and funny, but also thought provoking, but like fast, you know what I mean? So again, like that kind of came from my years of working in magazines and wanting to create something that would resonate with many people. And also that's kind of my tone too, I mean, I have different, like, when talking to me for a while, I kind of ricochet between inappropriate humor and like life lessons. I mean, that's sort of how I get down. So I think perhaps that might also be me.
It is you. It's your authentic author voice. Talking about the authenticity of Black stories, how did you keep the authenticity of your story intact going through the publishing industry? Were you ever concerned that an editor or the industry would try to change or soften or fuck with basically the tone that you were yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. Okay, excellent. Oh, well, shit. All right, let's go. Wait a minute. I was trying to keep it PG.
My favorite part of any podcast when people ask if they can curse and I say yes. And the stories get so much better.
First of all, no, the fuck I was not, because I know how the fuck to talk to people and I know how to talk to these white folks, right? So if we're going to keep it a buck, right? I mean, under zero circumstances was I going to allow the authenticity of my story to be diluted by anybody. And it's interesting because my editor is white. When I went into this book process, I was like, my team is going to be Black. Everybody's going to be Black. And that did not happen. I tried my level best. And, I was like, my agent's going to be Black. My editor's going to be Black. My imprint's going to be Black. Like everybody's, nope, nobody's Black. Even though I tried. But, part of the reason why I went with Flatiron that I love is because my editor, even though she is a white woman, organically understood my voice and the story and appreciated the authenticity and never gave me indication that she was going to fuck with the story, and never did. Right. I mean, she never, at least in terms of the way in which I was representing Black folks and the era and hip hop in the community, she never, ever, ever did, not once. And so I've been extremely grateful to have had that kind of an advocate around my story itself. It was a slightly different story with the cover that with some racial elements there, but the story itself, I never had a concern, actually.
Was the title always If I Ruled the World?
It was not.
Ooh.
It was not. It was not, girl. That's a good story. So the title was Sugar. For years, when I started the book, it was Sugar, and Sugar is the name of the magazine that my protagonist eventually goes and edits. And I really liked it because A, it's obviously something in the book, but B, I thought it was kind of a dog whistle to Black folks, to Black women, like, we call each other Sugar. Like, it just, there was something in it that felt Black to me. But then as I was going through the editing process with my editor at Flatiron, she at some point was gently like, hey, so, do you think maybe you want to kind of come up with a title that relates more to the themes of the book? And I was like, no, I don't. Actually, I was like, actually, no, thank you. No, I do not. I would like it to be Sugar. That is the title of the book. It is called Sugar. It's been Sugar for 20 years, lady. That's what it is. And she kind of like gently, she's really smart. And she gently was like, she came at it this way. And then she came at it like that way. And then she, you know what I mean? And finally, I was like, all right. Let me have a think, right? This was over the winter holiday. And I was like, let me have a think. And I started thinking about like what would make sense. And so I started, it's funny, I used to do this thing at Honey Magazine, which was my first editor-in-chief job, where we would comb music lyrics for some of the cover lines, and also for sometimes the lines on the spine of the magazine, we would use a lyric or something. And I was like, what if I could find a lyric or a song title, that would make sense. And so I started thinking about like iconic artists from the late 1990s. And eventually I was like, okay, if I rule the world, it just kind of rose to the top, in part because it's such an iconic song of that era, right? And Nas is such a respected and iconic artist. The title itself relates to the journey that my protagonist is on. The vibe of the song, it has nothing to do with my book at all or any themes in my book, but it's a kind of a good vibe song in general. And also there's an if you know, you know moment, because Lauryn Hill is obviously featured on the song, and who we all love, right? And Lauren was the very, very first cover of Honey Magazine, which again was my first job as chief. And so there's a sort of a kind of a full circle moment there. So I'm just so grateful that my editor pushed me to change the title of the book, because If I Ruled the World is perfect. It's just, I love it so much now. I'm in love with the title of my book, and I never would have changed it if she hadn't pushed me.
So I'm going to take that as a great moment to have you read something from If I Ruled the World so that we can get into the content of the book. If I Ruled the World by Amy DuBois Barnett tells the story of Nikki Rose, a young woman in late 90s New York whose goal in life is to be the editor-in-chief of a magazine. A scandal at the start of her career forces her to work hard and keep her head down. But once she gets her shot as an EIC, she is forced to match her passion with her work ethic without letting some questionable life choices, both past and present, derail her future. Here's Amy.
So I'm going to read a couple of minutes of the prologue, because the book starts with a bang, no pun intended. Prologue, New York City, spring 1996. I was a live for the moment 20-something like every other 20-something I knew, until one rainy Friday night in the Krispy Kreme on 23rd Street in Manhattan. I was licking raspberry jelly from the fingers of a very rich, very fine, and very married man when I looked up to see my parents, shaking rain off their huge umbrella and laughing. I might have been able to salvage the situation if my date, his trademark salt and pepper locks unmistakable from any angle, had been a stranger to my parents. No such luck. He was my mother's childhood friend from suburban Chicago. The bond they'd formed as the stray chocolate chips in their high school's huge snickerdoodle had lasted decades, with Mom even toasting the brides at both his first and second weddings. Dad spoke first, an uncharacteristic curse word exploding from his mouth. What the fuck is this, Al? My date, Alonzo Griffin, husband, father, and until that moment, oblivious finger suckee, had his back to the door, but he whipped around at the sound of my dad's voice. Jesus, what are you two doing here? He asked, a slight tremor in his voice belying his expressionless face. Getting a donut, I think, I whispered, shocked into stupidity. Yeah, no shit, Nikki, Alonzo said. He looked at Mom and implored, Anne, please. Hearing her name thawed my frozen mother, who strode over to our table and poked a finger in Alonzo's chest. In a furious tone, she said, How could you, Al? This is my daughter. Alonzo winced, but clearly thought the better of rebutting my enraged mom. Annie, he spoke in a low tone, my mother's name both a question and a warning. Don't call me that, she snapped. Then she turned to me. And you, what were you thinking? Tell me, please, what were you thinking? I had no response because honestly, I hadn't been thinking at all, unless having a torrid affair with my married boss, who was almost twice my age and just happened to grow up with my mother, was evidence of deep consideration. The situation was made worse by the fact that 6 months prior, Mom had called Alonzo, the publisher of Revolutions, a venerable music magazine owned by the even more venerable Park Avenue Publishing, to ask him for help with her wayward daughter. Black folks rarely make it to the top, so you'll likely get stuck near the bottom, where the salaries are dreadful. And most magazines are asinine anyway, she'd wailed when I first brought up my dream of being an editor-in-chief. After I graduated from college, my English professor Mom had begged me to find a job in a respectable and secure field. And in her mind, journalism, even as an EIC, did not qualify. But after watching me quit a job in finance, drop out of law school, then waitress while trying to get someone to pay me for my words, I think she began to fear I'd never move out of their Harlem brownstone. What Mom and Dad didn't know was that during my interview process, Alonzo and I had gone out for drinks. One thing led to another, And I'd found myself in a discreet midtown hotel watching my mom's old pal unlace his Ferragamo shoes, peel off his Armani suit, and unbutton his Valentino shirt. I'd made love to a few boyfriends by then, but this was something different. Alonzo Griffin had pulled my hair and grabbed my throat and bent me over every piece of furniture in his hotel room, all while whispering that he was going to enjoy taking care of his good little bitch. As we were getting dressed afterward, Alonzo had tilted my head up to look into my eyes. Baby girl, keep this up and you'll be the editor in chief in no time, he'd said with a smirk. But next time I see you, Daddy wants you to have a Brazilian wax. It looks like you sat on a fucking chia pet.
Thank you. So spicy.
Spicy.
I had a conversation with the author yesterday, about, the environment that, our books are sold in is not always the same environment, sociopolitically speaking, that our books are released in. Your book is speaking to this moment that we are in the upside down, with all the foolishness of the Epstein files and that man in the White House and the thing that happened to that menace who's now in prison that he did to all them girls and women.
Yes.
And you're writing about that era, specifically of when Diddy ruled New York, because we can say the name, he's been convicted. And so how does it feel to be having such a timely conversation about an industry that you loved and you grew up in, and that you came of womanhood in, as your character is doing in the novel?
I have to tell you, when I was writing this book, I had no idea when it was coming out, it was going to be so timely. I mean, I started this book in my 30s. I finished it 15, 20 years later, whatever. And the traditional book publishing process, I mean, it was sold in 2024 and it was released in 2026. I did not know that it was going to be as timely as it was. I had no idea that the quote unquote reckoning happening in the music industry was going to sort of come to a head, at the time that my book was coming out. And now it's true. It is exploring topics that feel very urgent, that are in the zeitgeist in a way that is making my conversation, my book's conversation with culture that much more relevant. So I've had a lot of conversations about If I Ruled the World that are, in part about the book and the process and being an author and the story and the characters, and are in part about the culture and, our political environment, and the sort of players in the music industry who exhibited some of the most egregious misogyny and sexual violence. And that has been unexpected, but frankly welcome, because those were the issues that I want to explore.
You said earlier that this book is in part about the cost of ambition. That is a subject that I am endlessly interested about, especially as a Black woman. What do you think is the cost of ambition, period? And then you can put it in context of your novel as well.
My answer on this has changed over the years, and maybe, coming at it from a 56-year-old perspective, somebody who's been in this thing for a long time, I would say the cost of ambition is peace. It's peace, and I say this as an ambitious woman. I'm still ambitious. I'm very ambitious, but it is not a peaceful life. I look at folks, who have been in the same industry for their entire career, who have lived in the same place, who have married to the same person. Let's keep it real, and there is something in that seems, at least, like there's so much peace to it, right? There's like a level of stability. There's a level of consistency. I admire it. I'm a little jealous of, it feels like it's a different kind of a life, where you can leave your work behind, when you get home at night, what I mean? When you can make a dinner every night, what I mean? And you can make meat and vegetables and a carbohydrate, what I'm saying? And put it on the table at 7. I mean, that is a world that I do not know. And I've never known it, actually, because I was raised in a very ambitious household. My mom, when she passed away, was the president of the University of Houston. And she was the first Black woman to run a major research university in the country. And so I grew up watching her work. And I just understand that part of what you give up with that level of ambition, especially as a woman, right? When we still have a disproportionate amount of our household duties, no matter how successful we are. I mean, that's just statistically true, right? You give up that kind of stability in your soul and you replace it with excitement. You replace it with fulfillment. You replace it with adventure, You replace it with bravery. You replace it with a lot of different things that I value, but it is a legitimate trade-off.
And so in the novel, we see Nikki, we see her ambition and we see how it grows over the course of the novel. What is it costing her? Or is it costing her anything?
I think for Nikki, I mean, we follow her on a journey. I mean, my protagonist, my God, she makes mistakes, woo, Lord. And so many people have been like, Nikki really got on my nerves. She made some mistakes. I'm like, I know, she got on my nerves too. I was writing and I was like,
That's the point.
I was like, don't do it, sis. Don't do it, Nikki. God, don't do it. Yeah. But I mean, but you root for her. You root for her because she is purpose driven and she is so good at her job. But you're also watching her on this journey where her ambition is at various times costing her friendships. It's costing her romantic relationships. It's costing her clarity around her moral compass. She's really invested in trying to make Sugar Magazine, where she becomes editor-in-chief, a success. And in doing so, she gets pulled into a world that rocks her sense of self, that kind of, rocks the way in which she makes decisions, that kind of forces her to put so many things that she values in jeopardy. And it's only when she becomes more clear about herself and her boundaries, and when she becomes more empowered and when she finds her voice, that things fall in place for her.
She makes a couple of work decisions in the novel that really kind of ground some of the cultural conversations, specifically about a rapper in the novel who is accused of assault and deciding to tell the accuser's side of the story, the victim side of the story as well. And I think this is what you were referring to when we were texting back and forth as I was reading the novel. But is that a decision as when you were as an editor that you would have made, a story that you would have run, or like
under zero circumstances? Under zero circumstances in this life would I have ever put that rapper on any cover of any magazine I was ever editor-in-chief, of which I was editor-in-chief. I never would have made that decision. I would have done anything else. I would have come up with any other solve. I would have done I never would have put him on a cover. I wouldn't have done it. But I wanted to show my protagonist backed up against a wall, right? I wanted to show the cracks in her character and her naivete at that moment. Because when she does make that decision, it's not entirely flawed. I mean, she is looking for a solve to generate sales for this magazine that's in trouble and she's been charged with saving. She comes across this deeply problematic rapper, but then decides to investigate the story and make sure that this alternative perspective is in there and is very visible. And that's not something that you would typically do. Normally the cover story would be not a fluff story, but you're putting somebody on a cover because it's somebody that typically, readers admire. But she was aware of the controversy swirling around this person, and wanted to make sure that her readers saw both sides of the story. So I wanted to show that these decisions are not always black and white. They're not always easy. For me, I would have gone a different direction. I might have sacrificed newsstand sales. I might have sacrificed other things that she didn't feel that she could sacrifice at that particular moment in her career.
What I enjoyed about the scenes in the novel is because it felt so real. As you said earlier, we've been having this reckoning in the music industry. And I think of the story that Danielle Smith has told, former editor-in-chief of Vibe. And she has a story in her book, Shine Bright. It's not quite a memoir, but it's kind of a memoir. And she's told it in different documentaries as well about when she put Diddy on the cover and the blowback that happened that led to an incident between he and her. And thinking about everything that's happened now with the Diddy case, and then reading about this fictionalized rapper and seeing Nikki, like the worlds are so intertwined that it's almost hard to remember that journalism is the fourth estate, right? It's supposed to be the fourth. It's supposed to be the fourth estate and the fourth branch that is supposed to hold power in check and accountable, even though with the consolidation of all these different conglomerates and media industries, that is not happening. But it's happening in the novel, for lack of a better metaphor or whatever. And so I enjoyed seeing that depiction in the decision-making process of it, because again, it felt so timely to the moment. And I don't think that's happening anymore in the industry. And so I feel like novels and books are the last places where you can tell the truth. Did you find that cathartic in your process of writing If I Ruled the World?
Ooh, that's so interesting. I can't say that I did, if I'm honest, because I wasn't writing in a time when media was so violently under attack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like media is absolutely besieged right now. Black media is triple besieged. Black women are quadruple, many X besieged, right?
And out of work.
And out of work, right? So when I was writing the book, it was cathartic, not necessarily from a media and journalism perspective, but it was, I guess, cathartic in that I was able to tell the story of this era from the perspective of a young, ambitious woman and what it felt like to navigate those levels of misogyny when you didn't have the skills, the tools, the language to really do so. When there was no recourse, who were you going to go to? HR? You know what I mean? Like, well, who are you going to tell? You know what I mean? Like, there was nobody to tell. And the book is ultimately a love letter to a lot of different things. It's a love letter to New York City, to music, to hip hop, with I have a, problematic kind of love-hate relationship, but I ultimately very much love hip hop, and also to like so many of the women who from that era, late 1990s, early 2000s in particular, who didn't make it out as unscathed as I did. I
Mm.
was very, very fortunate. I came out of that era stronger. I came out of it with molten steel kind of running down my spine. Like I'm unshockable. I can talk to anybody at any point. It's very difficult to scare me. But I know a lot of people who got, rocked by that era in many different ways. They got strung out on drugs. They had a whole lot of babies by a whole lot of people. They disappeared, into mental illness anguish. My friend Erica Kennedy, ended up losing her life, the author of Bling. I don't want to speculate, why, I don't think that's cool. But I mean, she is one of the people to whom this book is unofficially dedicated.
I remember when I reading about your book, I was like, it reminds me of Erica Kennedy's Bling.
Mhm. Right, exactly. She wrote about the era very much closer to the era when she was much more enmeshed in it.
Hmm.
And she was in it in a different kind of a way. Like she had more, I think, like real, like deep friendships with more bold-faced names from the era, right? Whereas I had a good time in there. Do not get me wrong. I was dancing on tables, two hands in the air. I mean, I did, some of the stuff I wrote about in the book, while it
Nikki
didn't
was definitely
specifically
on
happen,
top of the tables, baby.
I know what that looks like and feels like. Been there myself. Perhaps not undulating in front of rappers in
Body
that
rolling on
particular
top of
way.
the tables.
Perhaps not that, but I know of what I know of what I speak of. But it was just a very dangerous, kind of era.
So then I'm about to put you back in big sis role. To
Mhm.
every person, woman specifically though, who is ambitious and coming into themselves, coming of womanhood. I like that phrase. I'm going to keep using it. I just feel like that's a whole genre of books now.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
what do you have to say about what it takes to rule, not necessarily the world, but in your life and maintain and get out whole?
You know, the first thing I would say, and this is something that I live by, it is a huge sort of philosophical tenet of my life. Fear is growth. I really strongly believe that the way our evolution happens outside of our comfort zone, it's very difficult, I think, personally, to become everything that you are meant to be, to really kind of live the fullness of your life if you never ever step outside of your comfort zone, if you never make yourself uncomfortable, So to me, the first step is always, how do I make myself a little bit uncomfortable? How do I dip a toe outside of the thing that I know in order to explore the unknown? And it can be as simple as drive into the town next door because you've never seen it, right? Like it can be as simple as an adventure, a small adventure. I believe in little adventures. Like I want to see something new in my eyes. I mean, it can be as small as kind of starting there, and then that kind of yields a psychology that allows you to continue to step out and to understand that when you feel that fear, when you feel that discomfort, it's really a sign of you evolving and growing and becoming a more kind of interesting person with a broader perspective. I really kind of believe that into my soul. I also believe in relationships. By the time you need, quote unquote, need a relationship, it is too late to make one.
Mm.
It is too late to make a relationship by the time you need it. And some of the folks that I call for various things are people that I've known for 20 years and that I was nice to. That's the other thing too. I mean, you should just be a nice person in general. Like, just don't be an asshole, right? I mean, I don't think I should have
Online
to
and
tell.
in real life.
You know what I'm saying? I don't think I should have to tell people that, but if being, nice is not your natural get down, then do it strategically because you never know where people are going to end up. You know what I'm saying? Like some of the folks that I know were the assistants that I was nice to. I was just cool with. Not even nice to. It seems that doesn't even sound right. That I was just cool with, like back in the day when I was editor in chief and they were assistants, and we were just cool. And I would like sneak them into our parties, and you know what I mean, that kind of stuff, and just be cool. They're now like EVPs or presidents of like companies, and you never know where that person that you meet, what it's going to yield. Sometimes I've met people in a room and they'll call me a week later, a month later, years later, and be like, "Hey, I was thinking about you because, I have this opportunity, whatever it is, you know." And you really honestly don't know, So, I mean, it's building relationships with people, based on mutual respect, based on mutual kindness, based on mutual kind of like what can you do for each other, not just what you can do for me or what I can do for you, but like what can you do for each other, and you maintain that relationship and and then you have that because that's wealth, you know what I mean? So as you're out there kind of exploring and making yourself uncomfortable and trying to figure out how you're going to evolve into your next best self, you have this wonderful network of people with whom you've built relationships who are going to hold you down.
That's what's up. All right, I want to switch to a speed round in a game before I let you
Ooh,
go
that's it.
for the rest of your morning. What is your favorite book?
Cormac McCarthy, All the Pretty Horses.
Okay, who is your favorite author?
Taylor Jenkins Reid.
Ooh, what is your favorite song?
Ooh, Blow the Whistle. I mean, that's the oh Lord.
I love that.
It's the only song where every time it comes on, I don't care where I am, I never, ever, ever get sick of it. Every time it comes on, I'm like, what's my favorite word?
Yes, how you gotta say it like short. Yeah, I love that for you. Who is your favorite artist, any medium?
Ooh, I'm going to go with Rhonda Brown. She is a visual artist based out of Ohio. She's the daughter of Malcolm Brown, who is the grandfather of my son. Malcolm Brown was an acclaimed watercolorist, and they had a gallery, Malcolm and Ernestine Brown, my son's grandparents. It was the first Black-owned for-profit gallery, I think, in the country, and certainly the first Black-owned gallery in Ohio.
Ooh.
And now Rhonda is a brilliant artist herself, and she's reopening the Malcolm Brown Gallery in Ohio. And I just love that for her, and I love her work. And I actually have some prints of hers.
What do you think is the best book to movie or book to series adaptation?
Ooh, I'm going to go with my writer crush, Daisy Jones and the Six.
Okay. If money were no object, where would you go? What would you do? And where would you live?
I would live in Paris. I would have houses in Paris and Los Angeles and a pied-à-terre in New York, but I would live in France.
Name 3 things on your bucket list.
Let's see, getting my book made into a TV show. That has been on my vision board, and that is a bucket list item for me. I have a development deal, so I'm speaking into existence. I'm speaking into existence. I want to take a yacht around the White Islands in Greece. And bucket list. I want to take my son to Japan.
I love that. What brings you joy?
Ooh, my boys, my fiance, my son, and also being fulfilled, right? I mean, which is obvious, that is, what a part of joy, but being fulfilled is different than joy, because being fulfilled is like the realization, to my mind at least, it's the realization of difficult things that you have made happen. And the joy that comes after you have made these things go of your own kind of like creativity and hard work and strategy and kind of good energy. And when you make things happen for yourself because of that, when I make things happen for myself because I have all these things, and my bravery, I love my bravery, it's my favorite thing about myself, that is deep fulfillment, and that is, for me, it's like the purest joy, honestly.
And what brings you peace?
Fulfillment.
All right, our game is called Rewriting the Classics. Classic is however you define it. Name one book you wish you would have written.
Ooh. Oh gosh. I have a massive crush on Philippa Gregory, and I wish I'd written Anne of Boleyn. I've never written historical fiction. And the idea, or like Memoirs of a Geisha, you know what I mean? Like the idea that you can
Embody the character that well in the book,
yeah,
because The
And the
other
era,
Berlin girl, Philippa Gregory, was beyond one. Yes, I
you
understand.
know what I'm saying? I really love her writing so much, and or I love her skill, like because sometimes when you read historical fiction, it feels a little clunky, like too intentional, like somebody's like really trying to put you in the era. You know what I mean?
Mm,
But I love these writers for whom it's just organic. Like you're just in it. Like the characters are in it, you're in it, and it doesn't feel like you're writing historical fiction. It feels like you're having this immersive reading experience where you're in an era in addition to being in a character's journey. You know what I
mhm.
mean?
I get that. Name a book where you want to change the ending, and how would you do it?
Ooh, that's a really tough one because I feel like I kind of don't want to name a book because there are things that are coming to mind. But if I'm saying I want to change the ending, it indicates that I wasn't particularly satisfied with the ending. And I'm not messy like that. I don't want to be like, yeah, I didn't like your ending. If I wrote the book, I would have, I would have killed her off. Or I mean, you know what I'm saying?
I get that. Okay. My next question is a messy question, and I'm going to say that you can do dead people, namely dead white men. But name a book that you think is overrated or overtaught, and why.
Oh God. I'm sorry, dude. I feel like this book is just overtaught. I don't want to say overrated, but really overtaught. It's a Great Gatsby.
That
I
book
feel
has been
like
named several times on Black and Published.
it's
You are
just
in
so
great company.
overtaught. I mean, and I respect it. I respect the themes of the book. I respect the sort of immersion in the era, although he was writing in the era. But I don't know that The Great Gatsby needs to be required reading for everyone all the time.
I feel you. So, my final question for you today: when you are dead and gone among the ancestors, what would you like someone to write about the legacy of work and words that you left behind?
I really hope that people write about the way in which I represented the Black community, that I represented Black women, that I hopefully inspired our community, informed our community, entertained our community. I mean, I really hope that people kind of see the intentionality behind those contributions. But I would say probably most importantly, I hope that I have brought a lot of other folks with me. I mean, my ultimate legacy is the people that I brought with me, the people whose careers I've impacted, whose lives I've impacted. I mean, that is for me ultimately the most important thing. But from a broad legacy perspective, from what people will probably write about, I think it's probably, hopefully, my contributions to our culture.
Big thank you to Amy DuBois Barnett for being here today on Black and Published. You can follow Amy on Instagram and Threads at Amy DuBois Barnett. And make sure you check out If I Ruled the World. It's out now from Flatiron Books. You can get a copy of the novel from Mahogany Books and get 10% off your first purchase using code BLACKPUB at checkout. That's BLKPUB. That's our show for the week. If you like this episode and want more Black and Published, head to our Instagram page or our YouTube page. It's at Black and Published, and that's BLK and Published. There, I've posted a bonus clip from my interview with Amy about the tricky cover design process and how she ended up with a cover she loved. Make sure you check it out and let me know what you think in the comments. I'll holler at y'all next week when our guest will be Ashton Lattimore, author of the historical fiction novel, Runner.
The reason why the vineyard was what it was because there were so many people there who were fishermen, who had been whalers. They're just a bunch of people there who have boats, and it's very easy for them to get out on the water. So the way it kind of worked in my head was, well, like, wait a minute, if I know there were Black fishermen here, and there are all these Black communities here, I know they had the boats, I know they were here, so why would they be the only ones who were not participating in this smuggling activity?
That's next week on Black and Published. I'll talk to you then. Peace.
What's going on, family? This is Derek Young
And Ramonda Young.
owners of both Mahogany Books and the Mahogany Books Podcast Network.
We really want to thank each and every one of you for listening to this episode. And if you enjoyed what you just heard, drop us a review and rate us on whatever platform you download podcasts on.
We truly appreciate each and every one of you for supporting us and making us your go-to for Black books. And we look forward to connecting with you all sometime in the future.
Thank you again, fam. And always remember, Black books matter.